Hello and a warm welcome to all the Advertigers watching this interview. It's my absolute pleasure to get to chat with Mr. Lloyd, someone who's worked extensively in the field of communications and has really been instrumental in shaping a lot of young careers as well. Currently, he's based out of Delhi. He's an angel investor as well as he works on a lot of with a lot of agency partners on a variety of brands he's worked on. So, sir, welcome to this interview. Thank you so much for sparing the time. Firstly,
thanks, Hetansh. Great to be here.
Sir, I wanted to start out by asking about what was that moment when you thought maybe this was it, communications, marketing is the field. What was that moment when you first built interest in this field?
Hetansh, thank you very much for having me on your podcast, and great to be here. I think there wasn't one magical moment when I really made that choice. A lot of what I did, I grew up in Mumbai, did my schooling, went to St. Xavier's, then did an MBA. These were kind of logical things. But I was very clear that I wanted to be in the corporate world, right? So one of my objectives was really trying to kind of be in a mass media business, in a mass business that could impact the lives of various people. And obviously at the same level, you enrich yourself, you grow in your career. And as it happened, I kind of started my career in the fast-moving consumer goods space. So I was one of the early employees of PepsiCo in India when we just set up office in the early 90s. And I had the privilege of being there 12 years, going through various roles. And I think it was really at Pepsi that I discovered my kind of love for marketing. And I think that's where the whole process began. And then through my career, I predominantly worked with 4 companies, PepsiCo, and from there I moved to Motorola, where I used to head sales and marketing. And then moved on to Tata Docomo. We launched GSM. And my last corporate role was really with HP, where I ran Asia marketing for HP, which is the CN printing business. So that was really my career. So if I would look back, I would say very earlier on in Pepsi, I figured that marketing was a great way to directly impact a business. And also marketing was not just about communications, but it was also about understanding consumers, seeing what insights work, and what can you do as a marketer to change consumer behavior. And I think that to me was the really exciting part about being closely involved with marketing and communications.
Superb. Over the years in the field of marketing, you have been in a leadership role, and as we all know, leading a team of creative people might be one of the toughest jobs. How do you go about leading a group of people who could, at their best, dent the universe, and at their worst, not move a finger?
I think one of the delights of being in the marketing profession is to really be the privilege and pleasure of working with creative people. You're absolutely right that working with creative people is never easy. I think the rewards are phenomenal. And the reason I say so is that, I've worked in large corporates in Fortune 500 companies. While it's challenging to do great work that gets noticed and recognized, a lot of people within companies tend to be slightly more straitjacketed and slightly more serious. It's actually agencies which, in a sense, are extension of your college persona, right? Because the atmosphere is generally more lighter, the people are younger, the hierarchies are less stringent, right? So you can have a junior copywriter who can say his piece to his branch head, very logical. So I think truly being involved with the creative profession, albeit from the outside in my case, I think was fascinating and for me a life-enriching experience. That having said, I do recognize that dealing with creative people is not the same as, let's say, I dealt with my in-house team of sales professionals and marketing executives and product managers. Because I think creativity comes with its own territory. And I would say 2 things. I think one is creative people by definition, or most of them, tend to be a little not so straitjacketed, right? So they don't conform to norms. Right? Kind of reporting into the office in the morning, or getting in time for meetings, or adhering to deadlines. I think something that doesn't go very easily with the terrain. And I'm generalizing. I know that's not the case for all people, but in general, that's the observation. But on the positive side, I think it's this lack of wanting to confirm straight-jacketed definitions. It's just what makes creative people such fun, and also what results in that crazy and fundamental creative output. And I would say, therefore, as a professional dealing with them, I think you need to recognize that differentiation, right? You cannot put your benchmarks in terms of timelines only, or you have to deliver exactly to my brief. Very often, I've kind of labored with my team to create a great brief, and what the agency has come out has not just been completely off the brief, but sometimes been way better than what the brief was. And I think that's the magic of what great creativity can do. You can take a fairly staid problem statement from a business and then convert it into a communication piece that will really change the course and trajectory of the business. And back to the first question that you raised, and therefore I think the joy of being in marketing and communications is that you actually change the course and trajectory of various businesses. And in India, there are countless examples we have, right? If you look at, there are companies making industrial adhesives and adhesives for home furniture, and then there is Pidilite making Fevicol, right? What's the key difference? I think chemically, if one analyzes, there's not much of a difference between what Fevicol offers and at least 4 of its competitors does, but you can see the difference. Again, you have loads of examples. If you look at, let's say, the trajectory of Cadbury's advertising, right? Milk chocolate is unique, but it's not so unique, right? There are at least 5 or 6 players that have the same capabilities, that have the same sources of milk, of cocoa, of sugar. And then there's Cadbury's advertising that leaves a lasting memory in people's lives. So I think great communication can alter the course and trajectory of a business. But more importantly, it can also motivate individual consumers to make tough lifestyle choices. Nike is a great example. Nike defines its purpose as actually helping people live active lifestyles, right? The fact that they make sportswear and great kids and let's say great shirts is a little incidental, but their core purpose is how do you motivate straight couch potatoes from getting out and having a run.
Right. One more thing which was on my mind was, as creative professionals, people have a choice. As you said, the agency atmosphere is an extension of college, maybe lesser hierarchy, more independence. And when it comes to moving to a brand side, maybe it becomes, a slightly different environment altogether. You worked extensively with brands and along with marketers, creative professionals. So what does one take to succeed in the brand environment, when one decides to shift from an agency to a brand?
So I think the shift from agency to brand is reasonably common. Unfortunately, one of the drivers, sadly, is that a lot of agencies, remunerations haven't kept pace. So there is a vast gap. In my career, I worked closely, at PepsiCo, we worked largely then with J. Walter Thompson, JWT, now they're called Walter Thompson. And subsequently at Motorola, I worked closely with Gilby. And then more recently at HP, we worked closely with BBDO as agency partners. And at Tata's, it was FCB. So I've kind of worked with a broad range of agencies. And of course, now agencies, it's not just the creative side, but also is the media and there's the digital agency, there's the communications and PR agency. So work with a whole gamut of them. The reality is, yes, that switch is happening and is reasonably common. And I think it's not something to fear. I think on both ends, it's not something to fear. I think it's important to realize that what is it that you want to do with your career, with your life, and what is it that gives you excitement. Right? There's an old saying that, if you love what you do, then every day is no longer work, it's fun. Right? So I think it depends on what you like to do. Having said which, I think there's a slight difference. In the agency, you create communications for a client needs. You want to understand a client's business. On the business side, I think you assess the process of developing quality communications that is going to impact your brand and your business. Right? So I think you have to understand that. At the client side, though, you have a slightly more tougher act of being balancer, because very often you don't have the creative freedom to do exactly what the agency always suggests and proposes to you. You've got to balance it with the needs of the sales force. You've got to balance it with your budgets. You've got to balance it with the need of your senior management. Because very often the business has a set of objectives. And very often, as we all know, marketing budgets are finite, right? You can't spend as much as you want. Secondly, you're going to have pressure from your sales team, from your operations team, because there are periods that they want, let's say a heightened awareness levels, festive, back to school, special occasions. And there are periods when they want you to go low on communication. The consumer is not the same. The consumer expects to get a fairly steady stream of communication. So I think that fundamental difference is what one needs to recognize, saying that yes, it is very, very satisfying being on the business side, directing an agency. But I think it's not about the power equation. I think it's more about what aspect of communication, the creative process, what is it that you want to do with your life that's really going to make a fundamental difference.
Right. You were with a lot of brands. Some of the work that happened at maybe a variety of brands when you were around, some of the projects, campaigns that are really dear to you. Which ones would they be?
I think since I spent a large part of my career at PepsiCo, these were the glory days of Pepsi's in the 90s and say 2006. I think I'd point to some my favorite PepsiCo campaigns. But just to give you a broad sense of what I loved, I think one was Pepsi had this huge concept of scale. And I think at the fundamental thought that fast-moving consumer goods, especially soft drinks, teach you is that this is not an essential product, right? If all the Pepsi and Coke factories around the world shut, life wouldn't change dramatically. So to wake up in the morning and think that you're going to create a reason for a consumer to remember you and to go out and reach for a bottle of Coke or Pepsi, I think really puts marketing at the center of the whole process with that company. And I think Pepsi did that very well, because when it was the first kind of multinational to re-enter India in the 70s, an earlier government had actually virtually got everyone to exit, IBM, Coca-Cola, works. So I think in 89, 90 when Pepsi stepped back, and the idea was again change the dynamics of the soft drink business. It was largely controlled by one family that owned Thumbs Up, Lipca, Gold Spot. And Pepsi really had to actually change the dynamics of business and go beyond distribution. So they had to really raise the communication game. So the one thing that Pepsi did phenomenally, and something that I learned from, was really raise the bar. They decided that for the first 3-4 years, virtually all the advertising made by Pepsi come from mainstream Bollywood. Remember that 99% of advertising is consumed on a small screen in the 90s on television. But they actually got Mukul Anand, Vidhu Vinod Chopra, they got mainstream Bollywood. The idea was to actually compress the excitement of a Bollywood cinema in that 60-second or a 90-second or whatever you ran, right? And therefore, a lot of the iconic campaigns, right? The launch campaign with Juhi and Chadha and Remo, and then the subsequent campaigns with Kapil Dev. So it was really about bringing scale. The other thing that I think Pepsi did remarkably well, and one of my favorite campaigns, is the whole idea of being smartly competitive. Right? One good way to get noticed is when you take a pot shot at your competitor in a smart way that brings a smile to the consumers, not in a vicious manner. And I think one of the great campaigns then again was the 96 World Cup, when Coke became the official sponsor, and Pepsi ran this campaign that is much remembered, called Nothing Official About It. So they signed on some of the best players and said, cricket's not that white, cold, straight, boring game. It's about fun people doing crazy things. And that campaign was iconic. And I think later, the whole launch of Ye Dil Mange More, saying that you can be a global brand, but until you speak the language of what common Indian, the young Indian understands and appreciates, will not score. So they did this iconic Ye Dil Mange More with Shah Rukh, Rani, Kajol, Shahid Kapoor was young kid in that clip that was shot in 2001. That was again amazing. So it was really the scale and campaigns that became part of common man's lingo. Right? So Ye Dil Mange More, Mera Number Aayega, Nothing Official About It. These kind of passed out into lingo. So I think these would be some of my favorite campaigns. The other which I thought was quite dramatic was Motorola. And Motorola was a typical old world American communications company. They really believed they built the best phones, but it's tragic that people didn't like them while Nokia ruled the market. And Motorola again, used the star Abhishek Bachchan and created an iconic campaign with the Moto Razor, which was all about style and looks. Still then was not the driving force in mobile handsets. It typically tended to be, really functionality. So taking style as a dimension and saying that just owning a Nokia because your grandparents and your parents owned not good enough. as a young person, you have your own style and expression. Therefore, it's motor razor for you. It was another great campaign.
Okay, I just particularly wanted to drill into Ye Dil Mange More for a minute. I believe I was reading a book by Anuja Chauhan. I believe she was also probably the one.
She was the creative director. So Anuja was the creative director at then called J. Walter Thompson, now Wonderman Thompson. And yeah, some of those most iconic campaigns, she was the person behind it. So worked very, very closely with her.
Right. She said that advertising actually made me a better writer, because now I know that I cannot bore my audience even for a page. So I can't even have a page where I bore her. And, she wrote about that campaign. But I just wanted to ask you, what went into that particular line? Because, when you say Ye Dil Mange More, I think it's still very relevant. It's still very fresh. It's something that everyone would still remember and associate with the brand. What went into that campaign? What were the insights? How did the entire campaign manifest itself?
Great question, Hetansh. So first, I'll just comment briefly, and I think Anuja said it brilliantly. I think one thing that advertising, filmmaking teaches you, and some of our big filmmakers actually started off in advertising, right? From Shyam Benegal, and more recently Sujit Sarkar, and what a range of big time.
Rajkumar Hirani as well, I believe.
Absolutely, a lot of these guys start. I think what teaches you is the discipline of conveying a story in 30 to 60 seconds. Understand that when you're making a feature film, you typically work at 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 180 minutes, 1.5 hours. In advertising, you got a small window of 30 to 60 seconds, right? Most consumers don't switch on their television, don't watch YouTube to watch ads. They switch these on to watch programming, to watch their sports, to watch news, to watch their soaps, their serials. So I think it's telling a story in a memorable manner in 30 seconds or 60 seconds and taking people through some degree of emotion. Because they say good advertising is where you actually the heart. I love that, right? When you see a great advertising, it makes you emotional. I think that discipline is and therefore every part of that 30-60 seconds is closely analyzed. We do what is called a frame by frame analysis to actually look at what works, what doesn't work. So I think really, and I think Anuja said it very well, I think it's the discipline of keeping the consumer hooked, excited, interested, and having a little bit of emotion, that small 30-60 second, and yet remembering the brand that was advertised. So it's great to tell a story in 30-60 seconds. But remember, you also have to sell product, right? And some companies' business has to run. And that discipline is absolutely paramount. I think that's the critical part that advertising teaches. Coming to the second part of your question, yes, Ye Dil Mange More was iconic. And I think that whole campaign was based on the premise that you can be a foreign brand, you can be selling in 200 countries like Pepsi was, but until you connect with young Indians in a language they understand, it won't work. And the language they understand is not just translating a line into Hindi. I think it's about reaching out to aspirations of 1 million or 100 million young Indians. And what we recognized was in the late 90s, the early 2000s. The internet was slowly gathering momentum. But India was aspiring to be, young Indians were aspiring to be the best in the world, right? Their hopes and aspirations didn't stop with their hometown, with their little county, with their city. They were really looking, they had global ambitions. They not necessarily had a lot of the finances, the monies, or the opportunities, but they certainly had global aspirations. And Ye Dil Mange More was, in a sense, a line spoken truly, by a young Indian teen, saying that I want more out of life. Right? I want more excitement. I want more fun. I want more money. I want more fame. I want more wealth. I want more education. I want more girlfriends. Whatever it is. So I think it really was a line that articulated the aspirations of all the young people of India in a very positive manner. Right? And therefore, in a sense, it pitted Pepsi at the core of what young Indians were seeking. I think that was the magic. And it was jointly developed by Pepsi and the creative team at Thompson's. But the idea was, how do you articulate something said by a typical young person and use language that is right? By the late 90s, it was quite normal to use English. Right? Earlier advertising was very puritanical. You use or whatever. And now we realize that young people seamlessly mix local lingues. Right? You go to the south and the Bangalore and the Chennai English has a smattering of Tamil and Kannada as the case may be. So I think it's also an understanding of how young people work. I think that was where the line scored. And of course, the execution was world class. Like I said, when you got the three reigning Bollywood superstars, I was there for that shoot. We had Shah Rukh, Kajol, and Rani, and the guy who really aspires that that Ye Dil Mange More was Shahid Kapoor. He walks into this spectacular set and is amazed. And there's a closing shot with Ye Dil Mange More. So that line went out very well, and it really passed off into people's everyday language.
I think Shah Rukh Khan even fits that really well, because a self-made person always aspiring for more, to make bigger movies, probably in his prime at that point in time. So I think even that would have fit in well.
Absolutely. I think whenever advertising and communication speaks to the heart of their consumers, people resonate with it. Say, oh, that could have happened. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it very memorable. So I think building an emotional connect, I think, is the core of what great advertising does. And I think through those Ye Dil Mange More, Pepsi did it well. But we've seen a host of brands. I think Cadbury does it exceptionally well. I think some of the modern day advertisers, I think they do very well. I mean, every time I see a Flipkart commercial where 5 and 7-year-olds are playing older people, it's a nice vibe to it, right? Because you recognize a lot of the lines are exactly how 50, 60-year-olds behave, right? It brings a smile to your face, right? So I think it's also about being able to kind of weave a narrative that's relevant and that's built on insight, and people say, wow, this could have happened to me, right? I remember Swiggy's campaign when they had Harsha Bhogle's commentary.
Oh, super.
Lovely. And again, it's an ad you can relate to, right? You can see an old, diabetic uncle who's quickly trying to polish off some gulab jamuns while his wife's saying who's at the door. And I think those things tend to bring a smile to your face, and you remember them a lot longer. And that's a great key to great communication.
It in fact brings me to my next question, sir. Some of the works recently happening, maybe the ones, in the last couple of years or so, that you really would have liked and admired, some brands, some campaigns?
I think a lot of them. I like some of the new age campaigns. I think they're sharp. Some of them are very, very effective. Like I said, Pidilite Fevicol has always been one of the favorites. Not really new, but I think when Vodafone launched the Zuzus, I think that was a classic campaign. Of the new advertisers, I'm a reasonably big fan of Swiggy. I think what they did with the whole Harsha Bhogle and cricket was quite interesting. I personally found Greg's campaign with Rahul Dravid to take well-known celebrities and kind of twist their persona around and do something unique with them. I think that, to my mind, is memorable. So for me, great advertising is about telling an interesting story, bringing a smile to the face, getting some emotion, and yet remembering the brand. The brand connect has to be important. Another brand that I admire and they do, I think, very good work is Ariel. I think Ariel used social issues to tell a story in a very sharp way. So I think a lot of us remember, I think 3 or 4 years back, the Airtel campaign where they had Share the Load, right? Just telling people in good homes that doing the laundry is not just the lady's job, right? True. It's as much a male responsibility, right? So they did that whole campaign as a social movement called Share the Load, saying, right, if a young couple both are working, it doesn't mean the lady has to come home and do the laundry, right? It could be a guy's job as well. And therefore, they cleverly positioned Ariel in that space. I think, therefore, good advertising will also kind of have a small social message that could be relevant. Right. Brooke Bond, to my mind, did some fantastic campaigns tackling sensitive issues, right? The whole LGBTQ issue, the whole young couples living in together, sometimes even addressing sensitive issues like communal divides. I think some of those campaigns may have been controversial, but I think they made a huge impression and did very well for the brand.
Great. Advertising or communications is a field that's ever developing. You have some or the other development. Maybe there is a change in the medium, maybe something else. What do you say to a young advertiser, maybe in his mid-20s or early 30s? What advice would you give to him or her, or maybe to your own younger self as well?
I would say the first thing, Hetansh, is don't get into the metric trap, right? I work closely with a few venture capital funds, and to them work with a whole bunch of startups, a couple of them unicorns. And I think the one thing I always warn them is don't get into the metric trap. A lot of advertising is like switch it on here and get the revenue there, right? कि हमने आज ad डाल दिया और परसों पैसे आना चाहिए. I think if you look at advertising purely as transactional, that one ad should get you X amount of business, I think you're losing the trick somewhere. Good advertising has to have long-term value, right? Yes, it has to boost your awareness, yet it has to boost your consideration, yet it has to boost your consumption. But that's not the only thing it does. And today, I think because of the word emphasis on performance marketing, thanks to digital means industry, people equate good advertising with likes, retweets, shares. That's not the only thing. If your communication and message is good, it will be liked, it will be retweeted, it will be shared. But that's not the core of advertising. And you can't measure a campaign saying, boss, one day I got 1 million views on YouTube and I got 500,000 likes or reshares or Insta hits. I think you need to understand that advertising has to work in the long term for the brand and the short term, but the long term is important, right? So don't make it transactional. Don't get stuck into the metric trap. Have the courage to build a larger story. Say, here's what I hope to do with this campaign. Here's what it will do to my current business situation. Here's the kind of benefit you can get in the long term. So I think one has to look at a slightly longer term perspective. And if you look back in the last 5 years at some of the great campaigns, I think they've been consistent. The message has been consistent. The storyline has been consistent. They might have used different stars, different execution, more refreshed campaigns. But I think you need to have a more underlying for your business and for your brand on which your advertising is. And you should not take short-term calls. Don't fall for the need of digit likes, right? So putting, let's say, pretty pictures of puppies, or having little live videos of little toddlers, always going to be exciting. But does it have relevance for your brand and for your communication? Is it part of what your brand stands for? Will it help sell more products? So don't conflate advertising with lead generation. Look at advertising as lead generation being one part, but a lot of it is building affection and building kind of likability long term for your brand.
Great. I just have one last question that I'd like to conclude with. It's actually in two parts, and I just thought of it as you were just answering the previous question. A, does storytelling as as an instrument need to be deployed differently on digital platforms? So do you need to tell that story differently? And B, has the accessibility of advertising, so as to say social media, it's an extension of a brand, does it make a marketer's job more difficult? Because now suddenly day in day out he'll have to live up to what the brand guideline might need to be. So do you think the accessibility of advertising, accessibility of a brand make it even more difficult to advertise in the current circumstances?
Great question, Hetansh. So I'd like to take it in two parts. I think one reality is that today, because of the mass spread of the internet, right? We've got 650, 700 million smartphone users. I think today, for most consumers, there's a deluge of information coming, right? So whether it's your WhatsApp or the YouTube videos or the television you're watching or the Netflix, Amazon Prime, Z5, Sony Play, whatever. I think today we have a deluge of information, right? So getting consumers' attention spans is difficult. And that's one critical challenge. And therefore, yes, there is, compared to say 20 years ago, today to get people's attention to actually watch advertising is difficult. So one has to really reach wide and have reasonably budgets. That having said, I think digital is one huge advantage for the advertising industry, and that is you can customize your communication. Today, thanks to technology and digital, I can literally customize my communication down to an individual. Right? But even before the individual, I can actually go geographic, right? I can segregate my markets. I can ensure that, let's say, a young 24-year-old is going to see a different set of advertising when he tunes in, when he watches whatever he's watching on a digital medium, to maybe an older person. So you can actually customize it. You can actually therefore make it. What does it do to the business of advertising storytelling? I think two. One, it needs to, it kind of puts the pressure on advertisers to make their communication sharp. You cannot have a one size fit all, right? So you can't do this mass 30-second and expect all of India to do Bala. You have to create kind of different variants you really do. So I think that's, for mine, one of the big challenges So I think we are still in the process is that we need to have more digital advertising superstars. If you look at all the advertising greats that you see, the Piyush Pandey's, the Prasoon Joshi's, the Josie Pauls, I think a lot of them cut their teeth and made great 30, 60-second normal television advertising. I think digital as a medium, a lot of the superstars will actually have to come from in their late teens, the 20s, the 30s, because they will understand the medium much better, and therefore they will be able to create possibly shorter, sharper digital formats that connect with the consumer. So I think there is a bit of a difference. The pressure is more on the creative side to create because choices are so many, and today a consumer is always watching whatever he has with one hand on the mouse or on the clicker, right? So he can move, right? Unlike television, which is passive. I think that's challenging. The second part, I think, is more for the marketing professionals. Is that today advertising or marketing is no longer one way. There was a time that you had a brand and you put out a message, we just took it. Today, people can take it and respond to it, right? And if somebody finds the response relevant and whatever, then people's opinion could switch. So today, communication is a two-way process. You're putting a point of view, people are responding, and very often people like the counterpoint more, right? So very often great campaigns can fall flat because a prominent influencer, so to speak, says this was crappy or this was completely irrelevant, and people say, yeah, it makes so much sense. So while it gets talked about, the advertising is actually getting lampooned, it's getting banned. So I think it's that sensitivity that one has to watch for. And the last part, which is a little controversial, is the fact that thanks to social media and trolling, anything can fly off the hand. So as a brand marketer, as an advertiser, you're walking on eggshells. You have to be careful. Right? It doesn't mean that you don't take a stand on sensitive issues. I think you have to be careful because today it's very easy to misrepresent something and put your brand in a crisis, put it into a tight spot. So I think those are some of the watch-outs that I would look at. But I think it's exciting times and as great as any to be in the communications, advertising, and marketing profession.
Superb. I think we've got covered for the interview. Thank you so much, sir. That was really insightful. I think we had some spontaneous questions as well, but I think your views and your insights were brilliant, and just not for me or for my team. I think for everyone watching this interview, I'm sure they have a lot to take away. I hope you had a good time too in a free-flowing chat.
Oh, absolutely. Enjoyed this chat, Hetansh. Wonderful chatting, and great to be on Advertigers. And really enjoyed this chat.
Thank you so much, sir.